you all. San Jose, what a great town. Thank you. Thank you. Coming out. Thank you, Mac Tully and everybody at the wonderful San Jose Mercury News for not just sponsoring the event, but putting it on. Thank you to Mac Tully and PG&E and all the wonderful people that made that happen. It's great to be here. And I don't know if you're aware what happened yesterday, and when I went outside and looked, I think it happened again today, might happen the same way. 60% of you yesterday came by public transportation or by bicycle. A big hand for that. How many did that today? Raise your hand. Yay! Look at that. Look what we're doing. That's a success. That to me is a good event. I want to thank you all again for coming. I'm very grateful to be here. I came here in the most environmentally responsible way I could that was reasonable. No, I did not ride my bike. I'm sorry.
Oh.
I'd be schwitzing like a chazer right now. But I couldn't. I didn't have the time, or I would. I like riding my bike long distances, but my electric car would have taken me maybe a day and a half to 2 days charging and stopping and charging. So I took my wife's Prius. I got up here for $30 worth of gas from LA. That's not bad. Just the environment, it's the bottom line. My wife figured me out years ago. She said, "You're not really environmentalist." I said, "What did you say?" She said, "You're just cheap." Because everything I did, and I'll talk about it in great detail, has been, I'd like to think, has been good for the environment. Most of it has, but it's also all been good for my pocketbook. When I started in 1970, I was not a working actor in any stretch of the imagination. I was a struggling actor, an occasionally working actor, rarely working actor. But I did it all on a budget, and it worked out well. I saved some money and I did more. I'm just curious, I'm going to take another poll here like I did with public transportation. How many of you have eaten today? Some sort of a meal or snack or something? Very good, very good. How many people here live in some sort of a domicile, a home apartment, a yurt or a teepee? Very good. You didn't sleep out in a Kelvinator box last night. That's good, that's very good. And I assume you're fully hydrated. If you're not, we got water for you here. So there's a few essentials. I can see that you're all clothed. There's nobody nude before me. So you have a lot of the basics covered. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that because we have, believe it or not, we've lived, most of us, for most of our history, the vast majority of us, for the vast majority of our history, have lived in an environmentally responsible manner. Part of our human history for thousands of years. The reason we're here today and you all ate and you have water and because we lived pretty responsibly for a long time. And then a few years ago we started to borrow against that debt, that environmental debt. We started to live in a less responsible way. We started to liquidate our assets of solar power in a substance called crude oil. Crude oil, in case you don't know, and coal are both forms of solar power, is just stored in solar. That solar power is stored in the form of crude oil and it's stored in the form of coal and you use it up. But here's the problem. It took millions of years to make and we've used up a lot of it in just a few hundred years. That's the problem. That's not sustainable. And there's many civilizations I can cite, the people on Easter Island who did not live in a sustainable manner, and you saw what happened there. Got big stone statues left, but there's no evidence of the civilization other than that. And they've gone back in the pollen record and what have you. They have a good idea what happened to people on Easter Island. The people on Easter Island did not behave responsibly. They deforested their way into that mess. And they wiped themselves out in so doing. And there's a book about it. Jared Diamond wrote a book called Collapse. Anybody read Jared Diamond's book, Collapse? Pretty good book. Those of you who haven't read it, read it. My book's okay. Jared Diamond's book is pretty good. I'd recommend that over mine. But I want to tell you a little bit about how I came to do all this stuff that I do, when I started it, why I started it. I started it 38 years ago, 1970, the first Earth Day. I was motivated to do something. Anybody old enough to remember the first Earth Day? Okay. I was there. I started recycling. I started composting. I started buying all biodegradable soaps and detergents. I changed my diet. I became a vegetarian. Did everything that I could to be. Thank you. Some vegetarians out there. And I did all this stuff. Thank you. And it felt good. I felt, and I did it because I was fed up with the smog in LA. People say, why did you do it? I said, well, I did it because of the first Earth Day, but the more overriding influence was not the positive thing of Earth Day, it was a negative impact of living in LA in the 50s and 60s. Horrible, choking, smog. I couldn't run from here to that wall without wheezing like this. I couldn't catch my breath as a young man, and it was horrible. You couldn't see the San Gabriel Mountains, Santa Susana Mountains, you couldn't see the Simi Hills, Verdugo Hills. I lived in the middle of a valley, and you didn't know it was a valley, but maybe 30, 40 days a year, when it would rain or the wind would blow hard in one direction, we lived in the middle of a valley. And from where I lived in Van Nuys near Sepulveda and Sherman Way, you couldn't see it was valley. People come from out of town, why do they call it San Fernando Valley? Well, gotta take a trust me on this, there's mountains up there somewhere. And it wasn't just aesthetics. I could not breathe as a young man. I mean, I could breathe enough to live, but it was hard breathing. Very, very difficult. So I started all this stuff. And I also did it, I have to say this, my father, he never used the word environmentalist, but he was one. He had lived through the Depression. He turned off the electricity and he turned off the water. He saved string and tinfoil. He was a conservative that liked to conserve, and yes, they are out there. And he was a great man, and he taught me a lot of those lessons. And so I did that to honor my father. 1970, the first Earth Day. 1970, I was a Boy Scout. Scouting got me interested in the great outdoors, and I liked nature up close and personal. I wanted to respect it. So I started doing all this stuff. I bought an electric car for $950. $950, even in 1970, was a pretty good price for a car. And I did all this stuff for the environment. What happened next, I didn't count on. I started saving money. I did it just for the environment and go, oh, I'm gonna save some money. I did it to do it, and I realized it was cheaper doing all this stuff that I did. And you can look back on IMDb to verify what I'm about to tell you. I did not have a lot of dough in 1970. I was a wannabe actor. I worked very little. I did it on an extreme budget, but I could afford $950 for a car. I could afford some other cheap stuff that I did. I did it all on a very modest budget, and I saved money. That caught my attention. So I decided I'd do some more. And I saved more money, and I did some more. And saved more money, and I did some more. And here it is, 38 years later. Some of it took a long time to pay back. My solar electric I put in 1990 without any tax credits or anything. Long-term payback on that. That took me 17 years to get my money back that I have. And now, I won't have an electric bill to speak of the rest of my life, and I can drive my car around. I don't worry. 300 days a year I drive my electric car that I charge in the sun, so I'm concerned for my friends about the 450.